Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to, I guess, a new video series where I'm going to try and give you some idea of how not to play some of the maps in the game. This isn't going to be an expert map guide series or anything. This is mainly just trying to highlight some of the things not to do, and we're going to start off with what is, in my opinion, one of the worst played maps in the game. This is Lakeville. By all means, feel free to use the comment section to discuss your own opinions on the maps, what you can and can't do. I know some of the people who watch these videos are Unicum level players, so it would be definitely interesting to hear their perspective on things. Anyway, starting off at the north spawn here, and on Lakeville you basically have three main routes that you can take: one through the valley on the right, one through the road down by the lakeside, and one over toward the 9/0 lines. So I'm going to try and go through each of them in turn. We've of course spawned up here in the north, then going to switch over and do it from the perspective of the team in the south. So let's investigate each of these routes separately. I'm going to start over here on the right hand side with the valley. Now this is the most direct route between the two bases, and so this is perhaps the obvious route, or initially the obvious route, for things like heavy tanks to go and duel it out. But one of the first things you might already notice is that I'm not actually going that fast through this region or traversing that quickly. It's all kind of sluggish, and that's because all of this ground counts as soft terrain. It's swampy, it's boggy, it's marshy. That's the idea. And so this means that whilst this is geographically the most direct route to get to the enemy base, it actually takes longer than you might expect. And let's be honest, it's just a valley. It's a corridor going to the enemy base. Anyone seen the film 300? Where the massive Persian army was funneled through a corridor toward 300, apparently. 300 Spartans? Yeah. You might be starting to get an idea of how a push down this end of the map tends to work out. But before we move on to that too much, just to note, there is a position back here. There's a rock formation that you can use to defend your base. If the enemy pushes down this valley, you can try and use some of this terrain to defend yourself. You sometimes also find artillery sitting back here who are determined to fling shells down this valley. You can try and fling shells down this valley in artillery if you wish, or you can try and position yourself a little bit further over to support the city, but just to note this location. Another location worth noting, again, if the enemy do successfully push through the valley, you can actually defend your spawn point by using initially this rock formation. If you've got, say, for example, a little bit of gun depression, and it doesn't take much gun depression, but better than the LTTB here has, a little gun depression, not bad turret, you can defend this spot quite effectively, especially if you've got fire coming in from some of these back locations. And if you need to, you can always pull back toward the central road here and hunker down behind a rock or something here. Just be careful about taking shots in the rear from anybody who's in the town. So the point I'm trying to make is that initially, if the enemy pushes down this valley region, this is actually quite an easy region to defend. Now, let's say that you decide to push through this valley. Firstly, it's slow, it's boggy, it's swampy, so you're going to be slowed pushing down here. Secondly, this is a very narrow defile, and that means that it only actually takes one or two tanks to halt and advance through this region. Let's just say, for example, you poke your head up over here. Look at what you're facing. You're facing a concealment location there with some hard cover around it, a concealment location up here with some hard cover around it, locations at the back where artillery might be sitting, and all that is before you even take into account, and sorry, I point out these locations because they're pretty obvious tank destroyer camping spots, and all of these locations are before you even take into account any enemies who might be directly facing you down the valley itself. So, and this is true from both spawns, a push down the valley on this map, generally speaking, is a very long, slow, and arduous process and doesn't actually achieve a great deal of much. I mean, let's say, for example, that you do successfully push through the valley, and you manage to beat off all these defenders, and you manage to work your way down here. You've come through the valley, you're heading toward the enemy base. What are you then faced with? Well, assuming you've cleared out that position, well, what you actually have is some concealment here, and then a rock formation that you have to drive past, and most tanks will have to, are bigger than this tank, so will have to expose a bit of themselves as they come up here, and you can get spotted and shot at from, there's a little ridge line over there people can use, there's buildings back there, there's buildings over there, there's a region that we'll visit shortly off in the distance that people can use, and generally, basically you come up here and you expose yourself to a whole world of fire. The spawn point is just a kill zone. So even if you do successfully manage to push through this valley, you open yourself up to so much fire from the enemy team that it will be incredibly difficult to successfully capture the enemy base. So that's the valley from the north spawn point. Let's have a look at the valley region from the south spawn point and see what we're dealing with. So from the south, it's kind of a similar story really. This map is very symmetrical. Just to point out, if the enemy push through the valley here, I'm just going to point out some of the locations you've got to defend from. You've got this little ridge here, again a little bit of gun depression, lets you use this ridge line. You can use this lower part if you don't have the gun depression, and, well, I mean, okay, so the LTTB has 3 degrees of gun depression, you need more than this, but there we go. And anyone who pushes up through here, as you can see, you have shots into the sides of their turret, maybe even their hull if they're a very large machine. You've got this set of buildings over here that you can use. The walls are destructible, but these oil containers or whatever they are not destructible, so you can use these as hard cover, poke out, get a shot, pull back. You've also got locations over by this house over here, and again, if necessary, you can fall back to the baseline of the central road region here. So just again highlighting this is easily defensible if anybody does successfully push through the valley. So let's see what you are looking at if you decide to go to the valley from the south spawn. Well, firstly, you have some concealment over here where you might want to park I don't know, a tank destroyer or something, or even someone doing some spotting. You also have some concealment back there, just here. And again, you might want to park a tank destroyer there or something similar. The problem is that both of these spots are very, very obvious locations. And so if someone was in the mood to, and I'm thinking especially of artillery here, they might decide to blind fire these locations. Now, at least from this one, you have a little bit of hard cover, but it's not very much. And if someone does decide to blind fire these locations, you're probably going to be in for a world of hurt. But, you know, you might want to park a tank destroyer over there or something. Let's say you push through the valley. Again, you're dealing with all this boggy, swampy terrain. Anybody who's got a tank up into a hull down location on that mid-ridge can get shots into you if you're back here. A similar story is true for the other side of this valley. So if you're going to push through the valley, then try and make sure you have a tank with good gun depression and good turret front in terms of armor. And then try and come up to this mid-ridge and fight it out here. From here, again, you can get good shots down toward the opposite end of the valley for the enemy team, and you can often spot some tank destroyers or artillery if you manage to make it here. But if you don't have a tank with good gun depression, you're going to have to expose so much of your vehicle coming over this ridge line that you're going to take a lot of fire and probably die. And if you don't have the armor to do that, you're probably a bit screwed. And that's before you take into account artillery arcing shots down on you, because this is such an obvious path to use. And so if we come through here, again, you can see we've got a bush location that someone could use over here. You've got locations for artillery in the back. And you've even got this rock formation where sometimes people can play ring around roses with you, just driving around and around this rock formation, and really waste an awful lot of your time. And then, assuming that you do manage to successfully push through the valley, which will probably have taken an awfully long time, again, The enemy team have defensible locations there, as I highlighted before, here on this corner, over there by those ruins, over there by those buildings. They can fall back to that ridgeline, they can fall back to the top end of this valley, and there are locations with concealment toward the back there where people can put shots into you. So once again, like the south spawn point, the north, or the south capture zone, the north capture zone here is just a killing ground if you make it into the capture circle. And so the vast majority of the time, pushes through the valley either get bogged down in that swampy terrain and take a long time to complete, and then if they do successfully manage to push through the valley from either spawn, you end up coming toward the enemy base, and it's so easily defensible. If the enemy team have 3 brain cells to rub together, you start taking fire from a lot of different directions, and it's very, very difficult to do anything about that, and you most likely die. So, the short version of this is that the valley is a really, really bad place to go on this map. I cannot stress enough how bad the valley is. You don't actually have to send anyone down the valley because you have so many easily defensible locations to put shots into your own capture circle if you wish to. So as I say, if you really want to go down the valley, take a tank with good gun depression and turret front and go to that mid-ridge, but I can't honestly recommend it. Moving along from the right hand side, in the middle now, running along one side of the lake here, we have this roadway. Now this is often the playground of light tanks, medium tanks and tank destroyers to a certain extent. While this is a very linear engagement, I wouldn't really call it a corridor, because a corridor in terms of map design tends to imply that people from other regions of the map can't interact with you and vice versa, so you cannot interact with them. And you have a mountain range on one side, so you certainly can't interact directly with the valley, but you can interact with people in the city and on the other side of this lake. And so if you are in a more fragile tank, this can be a great place to get supporting fire in from. However, it does assume that you're going to have a scout or two. So, scouting locations. Whether you're in a light tank, medium tank or whatever. Here's one. A really nice one, this forward bush location you can get a lot of spots from. You do have to be careful, however. Someone pushing down the central valley from the other spawn will be able to spot you if they push through to there, for example. There's no concealment between you and them. They can spot you, and if you get spotted, it can take a long time to run away once you get here. So if you are going to go here, I would recommend reversing into this spot so that you can then run away as quickly as possible if the situation calls for it. Another location you can use to get spots from is this rock just over here. If you come over to this rock, basically you're not just sitting there, you poke out, you try and see if you can spot someone, you pull back, and you've got hard cover hopefully between you and anyone who would wish to shoot you. So that's a location that you can use, and you can have some really good games in light tanks on this map spotting from this central region. Now, if you don't want to be the one doing the spotting and you instead want to be the one providing supporting fire, there are a couple of different locations you can use. Firstly, we have this little rise here. You need decent engine power and you need good gun depression to really make this position work, because without good gun depression you come up and you expose yourself so much and you just become a massive, great, obvious target. But from here, you can either get shots over toward the back of the map there along the K line, anyone that gets spotted along there you can shoot, or you can also get shots into the town here, which can be very useful, especially on the encounter, but I'll come back to that in a moment. So this can be a useful location. Just bear in mind, if you start taking fire you probably want to bug out pretty quickly. Do be careful when you're using this this road region that you don't slide. It's very easy to let's not do it. Move forward into a particular location, start taking fire. So for example, you might get to here, start getting shot, pull back, and pull back onto that little flat region. The problem is you can't actually get back up onto this road from that flat region, and so once you're down there, that's it, you're stuck. So try not to do that. Another option, if you have good gun depression, or especially if you have good gun depression, but you know other tanks can do it too, you can use this rise to to get shots off on people and then pull back. You do have to be a little careful with this. You don't have the render range to, render tanks right at the back of the enemy map there, but you can use it to get shots into the town or into anyone skirting along the outskirts of the town. If we just drive along to the other end, so if you win, if you notice that you're pushing through the town and you don't think there's much resistance, there are some rock formations here that you can use to gradually advance your way up this central road. So you've got the rock location here if you've not already used it. There's also a rock location here. Be a little careful. This will shield you from fire from the town, but it will not shield you from any campers who are back there, and so they will be able to get shots into you. And this rock is basically the opposite. This can shield you from the campers back there, but it won't shield you from the town. Alternatively, I guess if you do this, you can shield yourself from the town, but not from the campers back there. Basically, in order to advance along this road, really, you need to have won or be winning the town. And then hopefully you can advance together. And then you can push all the way up here, and by the time you're up to here, you're getting into the region where anybody who is defending the enemy spawn from over there can put shots into you, but you're also getting into the region where you can outflank anyone along here who might be using these positions to defend their capture circle from a push through the valley. So the central road location can be really, really useful. And I do recommend giving it a go. So what about if you're from the southern spawn? Well, it's a very, very similar story. You come along here. If you want to do some spotting, again, we're talking light tanks, medium tanks here. If you want to do some spotting, if you're a bit circumspect about your spotting, you can come up to this ridge here, but it tends to get a little crowded. Alternatively, you can push up to one of these bushes. It's a more aggressive location and potentially a lot more rewarding in terms of spots. The problem is if anybody pushes up this road any distance, there's the very real risk that they'll spot you and you don't have any hard cover. And so if they spot you, you're going to struggle to not die. You might, if you get spotted, try pushing for this rock here, but it certainly doesn't guarantee your safety. If you're going to provide fire support to people who are scouting on this central road, again, you can go to this kind of ridgeline in order to give them fire support. So it's a very similar story. I mean, this map, as I said before, this map really is very symmetrical. And again, if you push down this central road, you can use these rocks progressively to move your way up, get shots into the town, and again, you can advance up with the people in the town. If the town is losing, you can't really advance up here because suddenly you'll start getting shot by anyone who's camping at the back, using locations I'll get to in a moment. So really you need to be advancing with the town and using these hard cover locations to shield your advance. So before we deal with the town itself, I just wanted to mention there's a few locations between your spawn and the town where you can use to get shots on people, if you're playing a TD maybe. So there's some obvious ones. Concealment here. There's also concealment down here that you could possibly use in some other bush locations down here. Do be careful with these though. This, for example, is a little bit more forward, and if someone spots you, you don't have much hard cover to hide behind. You know, bushes are great until they stop working, and then you need a rock. There's also some concealment over here you might try and use, but it suffers from a similar problem. Further back here are some positions that you can use if the enemy is successfully pushing through the town. These are kind of defensible locations. You can see here there's lots of rocks over here at the back, over there, and there's some concealment floating around as well that you can use if people are pushing through the town or if people are pushing into your spawn point. And if people are pushing into your spawn point, if someone's spotting them, you can usually get shots into them from those locations back there. And pour fire into the capture circle and defend it that way. Now, one region of the map you have to be very careful of is just the kind of it's not really a dock, but I'll say dock, along the side of the town here, on the riverside, the lakeside, sorry. Now, I mean, clearly, in terms of World of Tanks, this would just be a casual boat, because this is not actually a very big lake, but never mind. The point is that there are some bushes along here, and it can be tempting in a light or medium tank to go around here in order to outflank the people in the town. The problem is that you are very vulnerable to fire from this central road region, and generally speaking, people who choose this route tend to wind up dead, pretty much regardless of which spawn they come from. And again, you can see there are just some bush locations up here by the riverside, much like there are on the other side of the map. And some hard cover to use as well. Now, one location you get on this side that's kind of comparable to the location the other side of the town from the north spawn is up here. You have this ridge line that covers you, and if you use some of the concealment, you can get shots into people on that central road, and you can also use this to defend from people who have successfully pushed through the town region. If you move further up here, again, you have some more rocky locations, bush locations, similar uses. You also have this region where you have a bunch of houses over here, and I know from experience that you can, depending on where you're trying to aim, you can actually sling artillery shells in most artillery pieces from back here into some regions of the town. So be wary, and I imagine the same is true from the north spawn. Be a little wary. Just because you're in the town doesn't necessarily mean you are safe from artillery. So we're over here, back at the northern spawn, and we're just going to go toward the town and see what the town is like. Now, if you're making your way toward the town, you need to be very careful. If your route takes you relatively close to the lake here, you can be spotted by aggressive scouts from the enemy team who come up that central road. And you can be spotted, and then you can be shot, and then you can wind up dead before you've managed to find some hard cover. So, take a more cautious approach. You don't have to hug the red line per se, but do try and go right up the back of this map. You can go between these houses, you could go behind this house, whatever. Take a route that keeps you with concealment around here and away from potential locations from which you might be spotted. Try not to knock over anything, because I know from experience as an artillery player you can shoot people who are moving along here. Now, there are multiple different ways into the town. You could take the low ground into the town region, and that can give you some shots over toward people who are on the road and get themselves spotted. You can also take the high ground here into the town, which is just what we're going to do now, just to show you what it's like. So the high road comes in through here and comes into the far side of the town. You come through these buildings here, and I'm just going to knock over all the walls. These buildings here, generally speaking, is not where the main bulk of the fight tends to take place. This is really more a location that gets used if the enemy have successfully taken the kind of church region that I'll come to in a moment. And so then you might fall back to these regions and try and take them out. If you're careful, there are gaps through here to shoot at the central road. Of course, bear in mind this works both ways. If you get spotted, they can shoot you. So just coming through this road, you can see if you choose the lakeside approach, you get exposed to fire from the central road quite a lot. So I would recommend that northern approach, the far side approach, the higher ground. But basically you're aiming, regardless of which route you use, you're aiming to get to this central plaza around this church. I think it's a church. It looks like a church. So if you were to use the high ground, you come out there. This is generally where the main bulk of the fighting takes place. From here, you can side scrape off the corner of the church here and take pot shots at people over on that side. You can shoot anyone who's flanking around the town. You have to be a little bit careful because you are sometimes exposed here, depending on their position, to fire from the central road. So do be a little careful, or from back there. But this is where the main bulk of the fighting, as I say, takes place. Now there is one location that's kind of interesting from the northern spawn that the southern spawn don't really get a version of, and that's just over here. So if you take the high ground, you can also swing into this region, and voila. Now, these walls are destructible. The house is not. And you often find that people will come to just over there, get spotted by your team, and that means that you won't be spotted here, assuming your vehicle isn't massive because you've got these walls in the way. That means that you can kind of take a third-person shot at their location, hopefully penetrate them, and then you can pull back behind some hard cover so that you don't get wrecked yourself. And you can do a similar kind of thing from over here. Try not to knock down that tree, and again you can put a shot down range. Now clearly that trick only works once for each section of wall, but you can give it a go. And if you're in, I've done this in an Object 704 before, if you're in a tank destroyer with a little bit of armor, you can try and set up there and have some success. Or, not necessarily a little bit of armor, but a very, very big gun. So then you can fight over this kind of central plaza around the church. If you're successful, you can then push down one of these different roadways. This is a very direct route to the enemy base. The problem is, of course, you expose yourself to fire from the central road, from campers back here, you know, as you approach. So I can't honestly recommend this route. You can also take fire from just over here, a position that I'll show you in a moment. Oh, actually, that might have already shown you. So I can't honestly recommend you taking this road, or at least not out of the town. You might use it to flank someone, but don't come out of the town by that way. Alternatively, you can use this middle road here, and then you have a choice of which way you want to go. You either go over here, and then that will put you down in a similar region to the lower road, and I would not recommend it. Or you can then take the higher route, which gives you far more cover on your approach toward the enemy base. So if you're taking the high road, having won this little plaza region, then you come up here, push along here, and you sometimes find, and you can flank anyone who might be trying to defend that little road there. You sometimes find that people will try and ambush you just here, so be aware of that. You know, they can use these bushes to conceal themselves. But then this gives you an approach through, past these houses, and then along this defile just here. And using this route, you have an opportunity to shoot anyone who foolishly decides to defend from your push from amongst these houses. This is not a very good location. And then you can push through here, only minimally exposing yourself to fire from the central road. And by the time you get to here, basically the people can only engage you frontally. The enemy team can shoot you from over there perhaps, but you're covered from the roadway. So this is a far more effective route to take to then push on toward the enemy base. Now let's try and spin that around again. We're going to spawn, say we spawn in the south rather than the north. What are we going to do? Well, again, if you want to head towards the town region, you need to be very careful. The number of people who go far too close to the lake when they're trying to get to the town is startling. They get spotted by aggressive light tanks or medium tanks from the central road, and they get shot to all hell by light tanks, medium tanks, and tank destroyers as they try and get into position. They die before they do so, and then they complain that the insert tank or player here is OP, or they're hacking or whatever. They're not. You're just not playing very well. And because from this spawn you have this kind of hilly region that's actually taking the red line itself, you have to be just that little bit more careful. Now this is especially true since they changed how the render distance is worked out. It's no longer a square, it's now a circle, so you do need to be a little careful. Try as much as possible to hug this hill. Use this cover. Turn your turret to the side as you're doing so that if you do get spotted, if someone shoots you, they might hit your turret front rather than your turret side, which makes it less likely you'll take a penetration. And go through here, and then make your way into this little defile from which you have cover from anyone in the central road. I've done this in a VKB, and a VKB is slow with terrible side armor. If I can do it in a VKB, you can do it in insert slow ponderous tank of choice here. From here, you can then push your way into the town, and you've got cover while doing so. Now, if you follow this road to its, well, I was going to say conclusion, but if you follow its road to where it naturally joins with the town itself, you can see that now you have options about exactly which bit of the town you want to attack. Although personally, I wouldn't use this bit, this road here, because again, you're exposed potentially to fire from that central road. So push a little further along here, and then just here, there's a pile of rubble that covers you from fire from down this road, and so you can use this spot here, just a little further along, to then decide exactly which road you want to use, and if you want to go over here instead, you can. But it just gives you a little bit more cover. So you basically have two approaches toward the church. Technically there is a third approach, but it's not that good, in my opinion. Approach number one is this high road. You have rubble that you can use to side scrape off of, which can be nice. Be aware of people who are using the locations I mentioned over there, and just on the other side. Was it the other side up there? It's just either side of this region, although you might also find people sitting there, for example, trying to use that bush, so be a little bit careful about that. And if you push around here, you expose yourself obviously to fire from down that road, and also to anyone who's side scraping the church. And sometimes people push the other side of the church, and you might take flanking shots here. That can be a very risky maneuver because they open themselves up to shots from your guys on the central road, assuming you have guys there. And so that can be a risky maneuver from their part, but is something you should still just be aware of. If you want to use this road to attack from, I don't personally like it, but you can. You can come up here. Again, you've got shots on anyone side scraping around the church. You have shots down that road, you have shots down that road. Of course, that means if you get spotted, they have shots at you. Hey, look, I can see the enemy base. They, of course, can see you, potentially, or if you get spotted, they can shoot you. You sometimes, I mean, from here, you are usually fairly safe from the central road, as long as you don't push up too far. I mean, I just said you can get shot from over there. And if you push up a little further, you can get shot from that region, and if the enemy have pushed a little bit down that lake road, that can give you problems. And of course, the further along here you push, the more likely you're to get spotted, and the more likely you are to take fire from, well, pretty common locations for people to use. And again, you can fight out around the church. And then once you've won the church, assuming you do, you can push on toward the enemy base. Again, try to use those routes which give you cover from the enemy. You know, you don't want to make their lives easy. This route gives you a good amount of cover. And then you have a choice of either taking the high road, which can be a little exposed, or ducking down here. There's some concealment, but the advantage of this is that you can then move forward to this house, and that gives you some hard cover between yourself and the bad guys. And then you can push on toward the enemy base, again trying to use cover where possible. Now, alternatively, if you lose the town, of course, there are some locations you can use to try and defend from. Same is true from either location. I pointed out some locations up here from this spawn, and I did point out some locations from the south, but because they're quite good, I'll just show you again. So assuming that you've been fighting out in the town itself, and then perhaps you've lost, let's just destroy that truck as we go. And then perhaps you've lost the town, and so you decide to come over here. You can try and ambush them from this spot, but I generally find once someone's won the church region, they're going to push through these houses relatively easily. However, if you're defending, this region starts being a good place to defend from. So from here, or from just over here, you can get shots on anyone who's pushing down this roadway that I just drove down, you know, from down here. And you can also get shots on anyone who pushes through these houses. Be a little bit careful about taking fire from the central road region as ever. And then it's just straight on toward the enemy base, or going back to defend your own base, or whatever is appropriate. So that's the standard Lakeville map. I just wanted to quickly show you the encounter map. It's very similar, but I'll just highlight the main difference. Okay, so encounter map. There is only really one difference. You can see here the spawns are basically the same. This is the north spawn, the south spawn's down there. They're the same as the standard battle. The only difference now is that instead of having a base to defend just over here and at the corresponding location in the south, of course, in an encounter game mode, you have a single base that you fight over, and it is over in the town. So I'm just going to go to the location of the base in the encounter game mode. Now it doesn't really change how the map plays, it just emphasizes certain points. Usually this map, let's just destroy that truck because we can, usually the outcome of this map is decided in the town. That's even on standard. Generally speaking, the people who push through the valley, even if they win the valley, it takes so long for them to do so that they're not really in a position to have much effect on the actual outcome of the game. And this is even more true in encounter because, let's imagine, let's just go over to well, no, before we do that, let me just quickly mention the spawn point is over here. So if you're fighting from the central road, you can now actually get shots into this. Not spawn points over here. The capture circle's over here. So if you're going down the central road region, you can now, of course, get shots into this capture circle, potentially. And so this can actually be a more lucrative location for people who like to go to the central road running down along the lakeside. Basically, the location of the capture circle in encounter makes the town even more important. It makes the Lake Road even more important, and it makes the valley even less important. Because now, let's imagine that you have pushed through the valley, and I'm going to do this for one side of the map, but you can make the same case for either side of the map, it really doesn't matter. Let's imagine that you push through the valley, and you successfully win the valley fight. Congratulations. Well, as before, you now potentially open yourselves up to lots and lots of fire from lots and lots of different directions. All the locations I mentioned that you can use to defend from a valley push in a standard game equally apply to an encounter game. The only difference now is that you've gone to all that effort and you're taking all this fire, and your objective isn't even here. Your objective is over in the town, and so then you have to slog your way right the way around in order to get into and flank the town. Now, flanking someone sounds like a good idea. Sounds like a fantastic idea. The problem is that with the length of time it takes you to push all the way down the valley and then flank all the way around to the town, generally speaking, the outcome of the game has already been decided. Either your team has already beaten the snot out of the enemy team in the town, taken the capture point, pushed towards them and is in the process of wiping them out, in which case you're too late to the party to have a good game and to do anything meaningful, or the enemy team has had a good time in the town, beaten the snot out of your guys, successfully captured the base, pushed on and is beating the snot out of your team, and you're going to arrive too late to do anything meaningful. Either way, a push down the valley, I don't think I've ever seen an encounter game on this map won by a valley push. I've seen the occasional standard game that is won by the valley push, but far more often than not it's won by the town, a combination of the town and that central road region, but I've never seen, I don't think I've ever seen an encounter game on Lakeville won by the valley. Basically this map splits into two parts, if you will. You have the town and the lake road, and everything from the 4 to 0 lines forms this region that can interact with each other, and you can put in flanking and supporting fire. The valley is its own separate little thing, and because the encounter capture circle is over here in the town, that basically renders the valley utterly irrelevant to anything that might happen in the game. And that's really how Encounter changes this map. It just emphasises the points. It emphasises how rubbish the valley is, and it emphasises the use of the central road down the lakeside and the town. So, to quickly recap, different tank types. What do you want to do? Light tank, whether it's a regular game or Encounter this is. Light tank. Go and get yourself some spots on the central road if you can, or put in supporting fire on the central road region. Put fire into the town if you can. You know, that's your playground, if you will. Medium tanks. Depending on exactly your tank, you can either go to the central road or you can go to the town. Both of them can be effective depending on your machine. Whether if you're in a good matchup and you've got some decent armor, you can come to the town and brawl it out. If you have poor armor or it's a poor matchup, then by all means go over to the valley side. Tank destroyers is over to the valley road. The lake road, I'll get my words out. Tank destroyers is a very similar deal. If you've got some armor, you can come over to the town and duke it out. I've certainly duked it out in an Object 704 before in this town. If you don't have the armor, go to the road, the lake road, and try and put in some supporting fire. All of this is assuming, of course, that you don't have too many people already going to those locations. Heavy tanks. Pretty much invariably you want to come to the town here and brawl it out. Unless you're in, you know, there are always oddities like the French heavy tanks, especially tier 7 and upwards. They don't really do armor. They're more like medium tanks. You know, the FCM 50T, the premium, is definitely more like a medium tank. The AMX 5100 and above, they're more medium tanks with a really big gun. So probably go over to the road region unless you think you can get some good ambushes off on people. And artillery, the thing with artillery on this map is just to bear in mind that if you sit yourself at one end of the valley and just shoot people in the valley, you're probably not going to have a particularly good outcome on the game, even if you rack up a respectable amount of damage. Don't be afraid to move as artillery. There are locations that you can use to get shots on people from. The problem is I'm not going to go and highlight specific artillery locations because which locations you can use and which won't will depend very heavily on which artillery piece you're using. You know, an FV304 Burt can't really sit back here because it doesn't have the range to shoot people, and by back here I mean like over by the spawn point. And some of the French artillery have really shallow shell trajectories, so you have to be very careful about getting shots on people with those. So I'm not going to say specific artillery locations because you're just going to have to experiment and find what works for you, but don't be glued to that one spot. Do still move around, and you can, if you're willing to move around, get shots into the town, for example, which can be very useful. But just, you know, treat it with an element of caution and use your common sense. Anyway, that's my, I was going to say quick, but it's probably actually not that quick. It's probably about half an hour, 40 minutes by now. That's my little rundown of Lakeville, one of the worst played maps in this game. Don't go valley, go lake, road, or town. The valley is a waste of time at best. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that video, possibly even found it vaguely informative. If you did, by all means go and catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.